So what would you say is the greatest challenge at the moment for New Zealand society, and in particular, Palmerston North?
Just sort of overall?
Overall.
Overall, that's a big question. Okay, biggest challenge in New Zealand society.
For New Zealand society, shall I say.
For New Zealand, I think social justice and equality. I think overall, I think we need to take care of our people, and we are getting too dangerously close to American models of governance, privatization, whereas we probably need to be moving towards more Scandinavian or Northern European models of governance where we take care of our individuals. The gap between the rich and the poor is increasing. We've got the working poor. We've got families who in the, 30, 40 years ago, you could survive on one income. Now you might be able to survive on two incomes if you're middle class, but certainly not if you're the working class. If you're the working class, you need multiple incomes to survive. And I think that's a huge problem. And poverty, being economically disenfranchised, and the increasing gap between those who live in sort of have a good lifestyle or live in luxury with those who really struggle, those create so many other issues. They feed into displacement, unhappiness, depression, anxiety, crime, addiction. It's just, violence,
Yeah.
So I think the biggest issue is not creating New Zealand's sort of got a history where we used to be touted as not having a class system. And although obviously unlike Britain, unlike the UK, that's probably still true. However, we're seeing quite a big difference in how different groups of people live in New Zealand, and I don't like that. I want to see more equality, social justice, and looking after different groups of people who don't fit the typical Kiwi mould, who aren't white, heterosexual, middle class, and have their 10-year plans, planned out, go to private school, whatever it is. I want everyone to be looked after and everyone's needs met. So that's, I think, the biggest, I think, challenge for us is to sort of change trajectory in terms of how we're doing things and start looking after our people, our young people, our kids, our elderly, our immigrants. Yeah.
At the Meet the Candidates meeting several weeks, in fact, no, it was only about 2 weeks ago.
Yes.
John O'Naylor, the National Party candidate and mayor,
yes,
he mentioned on the subject of violence, and specifically sexual violence.
Yes.
That we need to be depoliticizing it.
Oh yeah, no, ridiculous.
Yeah,
sorry, ridiculous.
That's
ridiculous. I'm sorry, but government needs to be directly involved in curbing sexual and gender-based violence. Actually, curbing all violence, because sexual violence and gender-based violence actually grows out of a cultural violence, a culture of dominant or a promotion of dominant, control-oriented, aggressive masculinity.
Right.
So first we need a cultural shift, and I think the government needs to be involved in that, in steering that or being a part of it. We need primary prevention strategies, which is about that cultural shift, gender equality education, counter-aggression education, and changing dominant forms of aggressive masculinity, and the requirement for young boys to adhere to that type of masculinity. Otherwise they risk not being seen as real men. That's one of the core problems that we have. And
how do you change culture? How do you're the expert in psychology.
Education. Right. And you need a triple pronged approach. these sorts of things happen slowly, but we do know that historically norms shift, and norms around what constitutes appropriate masculinity, what constitutes appropriate femininity, what constitutes appropriate social conduct, they do shift. So it's about challenging it at multiple levels. So we need things like primary prevention education. I think, gender equality education starting at primary school to teach boys and girls that there are a variety of different ways that they can be. They just have to choose and find who they are. There are lots of different identities and personalities to choose from. The boy doesn't have to hide his emotions, feel ashamed that he's crying, because that's not manly. That's okay for a man to be sensitive, and it's also okay for a girl to be a bit more aggressive or sporty or, into things that are traditionally associated with masculinity. So providing different options. And if you need to actually, to be very radical and get a bit more sort of academic about it, you actually need to completely deconstruct a binary understanding of gender. So the idea that boys are masculine and girls are feminine needs to actually just be got rid of, so that no matter who you are, boy or girl, if you're born, a classic second wave feminist and academic insight or claim was that one is not born masculine or feminine. You're born a boy or a girl based on your biologically assigned sex, but then you are culturally feminized or masculinized. Right. Yeah. So you're shaped into a masculine or feminine being. And what we actually need to do is get rid of that binary so that people can take on varieties of different identity formations, even in different contexts. So you can be, a masculine woman sometimes and a more feminized woman sometimes, and the same with men. So we kind of need to actually get rid of
Does it kind of help that in English, at least, we've got rid of the masculine and feminine words? Like in French and Italian, they have,
definitely.
And Spanish, they have,
like a table's feminine and all that kind of stuff. But also Sweden, Sweden has actually gone further, and they don't even have he or she. So they've got, I think, I wish I could remember what it was. They've introduced, a gender neutral term as a pronoun, and it's like, it's not Z, I can't remember, but yeah, so there's no he or she. And interestingly, in Farsi, there is no he or she, you're just an it or a they, so the pronoun doesn't exist. So that would be another thing to do, get rid of he and she, and just, have one gender neutral pronoun that we address everyone as. And other radical things, not having unisex toilets, so that there's not such a huge differentiation made between boys and girls from a young age.
Right.
Yeah. So these are some of the, radical primary prevention or changing the cultural concept of gender itself.
Well, how then do you answer people who say, but this is just political correctness gone mad?
Political correctness gone mad. Look,
when they can't make a joke.
I know. Look, I'm sorry, but the rates of sexual violence, domestic violence, and man-on-man violence, boy-on-boy violence, is just horrifically shocking in New Zealand. And it's not just political correctness gone mad. It's not about hurting someone's feelings. I'm not offended because of it. I'm actually concerned of its ultimate outcomes, which is actually death. People are dying because of these really antiquated, sexist, problematic ways of viewing men and women. And it needs to change. And it costs us a lot. It costs us millions, billions of dollars in terms of healthcare, police call-outs, ongoing therapy, all that sort of stuff. So if we had a culture which was based around more ethical, sexual and relational relating, just treating each other as good human beings, no matter whether you're a boy or a girl, we would get along, we would go much further in terms of decreasing all the negative stats that we're seeing and saving ourselves a lot of money, and also having a better quality of life and general overall well-being.
I can't remember his name, but the Conservative Party candidate for Rangitikei mentioned when talking about crime,
Yep.
and the Conservatives' very tough stance on crime, he mentioned his reasons for supporting that, and I found that a little bit shocking. I'm sure you would have had a similar reaction when he said, "My wife is scared. I have to protect my wife." I mean, I'm not quoting him. I'm paraphrasing. But, we have to protect our women. They're using the possessive in a very
there are lots of different ways of approaching.
Is that like 2 steps way back? Or?
It's a paternalistic form of masculinity, or it's a paternalistic kind of like an older way of relating between men and women, and it still exists. And actually, in your mainstream social psychological literature, they have 2 different kinds of sexism that they look at, and one is hostile sexism, which is your old school women are incompetent, they're not as smart as men, they just should be pretty and look good and so on, they're just objects, sexual objects. That's hostile sexism. And then there's benevolent sexism, and benevolent sexism is a bit more complex because it's about protecting and cherishing women but putting them on a pedestal and
still treating them as something
patronised,
to be acquired.
Acquired and looked after. They're not sort of strong enough or capable enough themselves. And I guess for him, he means well, but that's where it's coming from. It's about women can't take care of themselves. They're not only, a funny story is there's a famous quote somewhere that I wrote or read, and it's about, women need other men to protect them. Women need men to protect them from other men, and that's pretty bleak, really. So, and I think one of the fundamental human rights infringements in the world and in New Zealand, I think, is the fact that women cannot occupy space safely. They cannot occupy public space safely, and they cannot occupy private space safely. So you are.
So is that what's at the heart of the issue when Mass University in Wellington gives advice to female students, as they did recently, that to avoid being raped.
Wear sneakers.
Wear sneakers and carry a whistle.
No, ridiculous. I mean, that's just that old-fashioned victim blaming, number one, and a complete denial of the perpetrator in that context, but also reinstating that rape myth that rapes are perpetrated by strangers, stranger danger, that ridiculous stranger danger discourse, which is actually not correct because most sexual violence happens with people that you know or in the home or in current relationships. So people and this is what, say, for example, makes it very difficult when women do experience sexual coercion, sexual assault or rape in a dating scenario or in a relationship or even cohabitating or marriage scenario. It's very difficult to get a conviction because people only imagine rape as, well, what you must have been like chased down in the middle of a dark alley and violently and brutally raped at gunpoint or knife point. That's the only legitimate type of rape narrative we have, and it makes it very difficult to bring into light all the other more common contexts or scenarios where actual non-consensual sex happens.